Petropavlovsk was the lead ship of the Petropavlovsk class of pre-dreadnought battleships built for the Imperial Russian Navy. She displaced 11,854 long tons at full load and was 369 feet long overall, and mounted a main battery of 4 12-inch guns in 2 twin turrets. Petropavlovsk participated in the Boxer Rebellion, and during the Russo-Japanese War was the flagship of the First Pacific Squadron, taking part in battles against the Imperial Japanese Navy. On 13 April 1904, the battleship was sunk after striking 2 mines near Port Arthur. 652 men and 27 officers died, including the Vice Admiral Stepan Makarov and renowned war artist Vasily Vereshchagin. The loss of Petropavlovsk and Makarov greatly hindered the Russians in the war. Design. The first design for Petropavlovsk and her sister ships of the Petropavlovsk class was approved in January 1891. She was to be an improved version of the battleship Imperator Nikolai I, but with most of her armament in barbets, including 4 12-inch guns. The class was designed with a displacement of 10,960 long tons at full load. She had a full waterline built, and the upper hull featured a tumble home. Imperator Nikolai I was chosen as a starting point for the design because of her good seakeeping and seaworthiness. Some characteristics were copied from the French battleship Brennus and the American Indiana-class battleships, such as the flush-deck hull and Brennus's high freeboard. Following the redesign of the class, Petropavlovsk ceased to resemble Imperator Nikolai I. The armor plating was changed before construction, and plans for the armament were modified while the ship was being built. The barbets were replaced with turrets, including wing turrets for some of the secondary 6-inch guns modeled after those on Brennus, with electric hoists. The propulsion was based on the machinery on Georgy Pobedino sets. Petropavlovsk had nickel-steel armor imported from the United States. Characteristics. Petropavlovsk displaced 11,842 long tons and was 376 feet long overall. She had a beam of 70 feet and a maximum draft of 28 feet 3 inches. She was powered by 16 cylindrical boilers with coal-burning furnaces, and had bunkers for 1,050 long tons of coal. This gave her a range of 3,750 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 10 knots. She had a crew of 662. The ship's main armament was a battery of 4 12-inch guns in 2 twin turrets. Her secondary armament was a battery of 12 6-inch guns. She had also 10 47mm guns, 28 37mm anti-torpedo boat guns, and 6 14-inch torpedo tubes, 4 of which were submerged. Service history. Early years. In October 1897, Petropavlovsk sailed from St. Petersburg to Kronstadt to be outfitted. In 1898 the guns were fitted. Later the battleship moved to Liepaja, returning to Kronstadt in 1899. On 5 October 1899, Petropavlovsk was transferred to the Far East and East Asia Squadron. Alexander Kolchak, who was the chief of the watch on aboard, was to have conducted hydrology experiments in the northern Pacific Ocean. However, when the ship arrived in the Mediterranean, Kolchak accepted a position with Edouard Tolle's expedition and left the vessel. Petropavlovsk reached Port Arthur on 28 April 1900, becoming the flagship of Vice Admiral Skridlov and the East Asia Squadron. In 1900 the ship took part in the suppression of the Boxer Rebellion in China. In October 1902 Rear Admiral Oskar Viktorovich Stock took command of the East Asia Squadron and raised his flag on Petropavlovsk. Russo-Japanese War. In early February 1904 the Japanese Navy launched a surprise attack on the Russian fleet at Port Arthur. The squadron was attacked by a flotilla of Japanese torpedo boat destroyers. The Russians were not prepared for the attack and confusion ran rampant throughout the harbor's interior. Petropavlovsk escaped damage during the torpedo attack, but was lightly damaged in an engagement the next day against the Japanese fleet, killing 1 and wounding 4. Petropavlovsk fired 20 12-inch and 68 6-inch shells at the Japanese battleships, but none hit. As a result of the damage incurred in the attack by Zezarevich and the subsequent lengthy repair time, Makarov was compelled to choose as his flagship Petropavlovsk against his better judgment, sinking having failed to blockade or bottle up the Russian squadron at Port Arthur by sinking block ships in the harbor's channel. The Japanese under Admiral Togo formulated a new plan. Ships were to mine the entrance from the harbor and then lure the Russians into the minefield in the hopes of sinking a number of Russian warships. Under cover of 4 detachments of torpedo boat destroyers, the mine-layer Koromaru began to lay mines near the entrance to Port Arthur on the night of the 31st of March. The Japanese were observed by Admiral Makarov, who believed that they were Russian destroyers whom he had ordered to patrol that area. On the 13th of April 1904, Strashny, a Russian destroyer, was intercepted by Japanese destroyers. A sea battle erupted between the opposing destroyers. Makarov immediately dispatched the cruiser Bayan to assist Strashny. After Bayan had informed on presence of enemy cruisers on the site, Makarov decided to lead main forces in order to seek battle with the surrounding enemy warships and rescue more survivors from Strashny. He led 2 battleships, 4 cruisers and a group of destroyers into the Yellow Sea. However, the Japanese retreated beyond Port Arthur's gunfire support range, and had been reinforced by main forces of 6 battleships. At 0850 Makarov turned around to head back to the harbor and join with 3 other battleships that had just left, after the squadron had united and turned back towards the enemy, about 2 miles from the shore. On 9.42 Petropavlovsk detonated a Japanese-laid mine on her port side. Petropavlovsk sank, taking 27 officers and 652 men, including Admiral Makarov and war artist Vasily Vereshchagin with her. A monument was constructed in St. Petersburg in 1913 to honor Stefan Makarov after Japanese divers identified his remains inside the wreck of Petropavlovsk and gave him a burial at sea.